Most coaches track the same four things, which is your calories, your macros, proteins, fats, and carbs, your weight, and before and after photos, progress photos. The reason it works is that you get forced into discipline, into sticking with a certain amount of food, which usually is eating less. You get the kick in the butt, right? Because you're being coached throughout the process, and you have a great before and after. And you have 12 weeks, for example, of being pushed. But the trap is that when the program ends, it stops, right? You don't have the kick in the butt anymore, and the weight comes back because you're not sticking with these kind of strict numbers and approaches and measuring these things in a quantitative way and then following it specifically like that. You're not sticking with that long term because you haven't tackled the roots of why you haven't been sustainable with things, right? So in the first place, the markers that guide the whole journey, which is how much you're eating and what you're eating, and then taking the progress pictures and looking at this superficially and tracking it in a quantitative way, where just how much you're eating of what kind of thing, is the wrong thing to track. It misses the mark because in the first place, the problem was a completely different one, which we're getting to in a second. Okay, and that's also what I'm doing. I'm going the complete opposite way. That's how you can think of it. What I look at, and I also, of course, track how much people are eating and how they're looking, right? If they're making progress, if they want to tone up and lose weight, for example. But what we're tracking that actually moves the needle is your quality of sleep. How long does it take you to fall asleep? How energetic are you when you're waking up? What's your energy after meals throughout the day? The focus. If you have type 1 diabetes like myself, your time in range, right? What's your A1C? What's your blood sugar levels? How are you feeling? And these kind of things give us a way better idea of where you're at long term, because only when that energy is good, you will be able to stick with it long term. Imagine in these 12 weeks, working with another coach, of tracking and restricting your calories and macros and watching everything closely, losing weight, 10 kilograms and looking good on the picture after the first 12 weeks, but then you actually have less energy than before and you're more stressed. It takes a lot of mental bandwidth to stick with everything, and it kind of negatively impacts your sleep. Like, imagine being at that place and then obviously you're not going to stick with that. So you've started with the wrong metrics, and that's what's usually being done, because you feel like working with someone who only tracks these calories, that they are doing a good job because you're making progress. And when you're not sticking with it after the program, then you're associating that with yourself. You're telling yourself you've not been consistent, and it's not the program that you're blaming, but yourself. But it was the issue that the program only looked at these superficial and quantitative metrics that actually don't impact your well-being and don't impact the sustainability of your health and fitness journey, right? So when your sleep is better on the other side, when energy is stable, when your blood sugar is steady, everything starts to be more enjoyable, and you're setting yourself up for way more progress, because then you can stick with the calorie deficit and you can stick with something else for a longer time, and it becomes something more lasting. Okay, so the thing that felt like torture before becomes a routine that a client that you actually like, okay, that is actually enjoyable. And that's when things click. And I also see it every day, right? When talking to women who approach me via Instagram, for example, then ask me, right, what things about the program and how it works and everything. They're all worried they can't stick with it and that they don't have the discipline, that they are not that kind of person that can be consistent with their mindset. Yeah, it's because everyone is coming from a place of thinking restriction and torture is the only way. No. Right? If you think about it from a different angle, like, do you think that every single healthy and fit person on the planet is only there because they're constantly torturing and forcing themselves? No, right? They found an enjoyable routine, and some are, unfortunately, but then they've chosen a route that is not really enjoyable and sustainable, and probably costs them more stress than anything. But that's not the proper way of doing it long term. Okay, so what I also struggle with sometimes personally, honestly, talking about this, is that I have a hard time understanding this, because I can't say it, but if you've never experienced and lived this, if you are living in this kind of how do you say, vicious circle of eating less and then associating progress with negative, with feeling bad and being super strict and actually being low in energy, then you won't believe it because you haven't really felt it. You can believe it, but you haven't really lived it yet. And it's hard to sometimes explain that. So a lot of times when I talk to women who want to lose weight, we're not diving too deep in their goals of increasing energy because they don't even have that goal. They just come to me saying they want to lose belly fat, right? But then they end up working with me and they say, then they for the first time realize how big the difference in their energy level suddenly is and how they're feeling suddenly, how it feels to in the morning to be energetic and be focused at work right away and have the energy to be humorous, to make fun with colleagues, to call their mom, to right, just make sure that they are great and they have the energy to do things that they enjoy. And a lot of times, because as humans, as survival machines, we're really good at like adapting to situations. We kind of normalize that low energy mode, right? We normalize it because we're so used to it. But a lot of times you can't even imagine what it's like to live on the other side again, right? So you can picture it, living from this place of exhaustion. And that's sometimes a difficult situation to be in. So a lot of times I won't even talk about that with women that I start working with too much, but then they realize it along the journey that suddenly they are a different human. And a lot of times it happens step by step. So I remind them, right, after like 12, 15, 20 weeks, hey, look at where you were in the beginning. You constantly told me your energy in the morning was a 3 out of 10. You felt like a zombie. Now you're a consistent 8 or sometimes even 9 out of 10. That's a difference of day and night, right? And then they are, yeah, that's true, right? I wouldn't have believed that I could have gotten that far when we first talked with each other. So that's where most are coming from that I talk to, right? I would say, looking back at it, I can't count the number of women, right? They thought we would like focus on weight loss and thought we would do these kind of things, but then we started with that. Suddenly their quality of life and energy transformed and it became even accessible to be consistent with workouts and consistent with the nutrition. And suddenly these kind of pieces of the puzzle, they fit together because now it makes sense that you couldn't be consistent before, right? And then they understand, hey, yeah, that's why it's called the metabolism reset, because we're working on the system, turning the system around, right? You could think of it as so to say a paradigm shift, because we're starting from a different angle, a different lens, so to say. Okay, but also, right, it's not your fault that you don't know. You've been taught systems and approaches out there. The things that are popular are things like intermittent fasting, or calorie counting, and like calorie tracking, being in a calorie deficit, like doing keto, and these kind of quick fixes, because these things lead to quick results and therefore they get popular because a lot of people hear about them and other people want to get the quick result. And then that's the nature of things. That's why these things are popular. So it's not your fault that you don't know. It's just not, usually it's not in people's horizon that it can be done differently. Okay, so again, it's more about how you feel after meals. How is your energy like? How fast are you falling asleep? Are you sleeping throughout the night? What's your time in range with type 1 diabetes throughout the day? These are like the more interesting metrics to look at when it comes to making that journey more sustainable and setting you up for more progress. And that also depends, right, on where you're coming from. If you have primarily issues with feeling bloated after meals, then it's these kind of things that we're going to talk about and track and check up on, right? So depending on what the constraint is, the energy is the most common. That's why I'm giving that kind of example. But what I'm talking about here, the whole concept is qualitative metrics instead of just the quantitative ones. So it's not about the numbers and faster, bigger, right, and these kind of things. And it's more about the qualities in between and how you're feeling and things that can't be tracked, right, on a scale, but things that you're feeling. So these are the ones that kind of help guide such a journey on the way to feeling better and making this a lasting change. Okay, and if I'm being straightforward, I think also the reason that a lot of coaches still are focusing on these, I would call them honestly vanity metrics of they are not vanity metrics. Of course, I also track clients' weight and make sure that they're actually going in the preferred direction. But a lot of coaches are starting with that, is that I think the term coach is not a protected term, so everyone can do it. And a lot of people just have their knowledge themselves from social media. A lot of coaches out there, right, it's just based off of their personal experience, and right, they've started coaching 2 years ago because they didn't like their previous job, and then right, they started doing coaching. And right, coming from these kind of perspectives, it makes sense, because if the first thing that you will find when you look for weight loss is people telling you you're supposed to download a calorie counting app and track everything, and that is a helpful tool in specific scenarios, but it's not the tool to lose weight, right? There's many more important things than just being aware of the number of calories that your food has, okay? So it's one important tool, and since it's the most popular one, it's the one that also most coaches are using. But if you look at where this is coming from again, right, the calorie counting and calories in versus calorie out, it's because scientifically we know that we're going to lose weight if we're in a calorie deficit, right? Thermodynamics, which means, right, if you burn more than you're actually consuming, then you're going to lose weight. But also here, where are these numbers coming from? It's statistical averages. So if you want to find out how much you're burning, the closest thing that you can do quickly, right, within the next 5 minutes or within the next hours, is looking up online a TDEE calculator, right, your total daily energy expenditure, how much you're burning, and you entering your height, you're entering your age, sex, and activity level, right? And then it gives you like how many calories you're burning. But also it's a statistical average. It's not a fact. It's something that is being influenced by the hormonal situation, by stress, by you name it. There's so many different things. There's even genetical markers that can't be explained, right? So we know from research that sometimes there's differences of up to 20-30% between individuals that can't be explained by things like muscle mass and so on and so forth. So a lot of times there's genetical differences in how much we're burning that can't be explained, and that just means that what you're looking up online is not a fact. It's just an assumption. It's an approximate, and it's a bit like me telling you, because you're a woman, you are 1 meter, depending on what country you're based in, you are 1 meter and 68 centimeters tall. If that's the statistical average for your country, then this is that's a correct statement, right? It's correct statistically, but you are not, right? Because maybe you are, but there's a standard deviation, right? So everyone differs from that standard a bit. And if we just assume, because it's a statistical average and it's a statistically correct answer, that your calorie burn is XYZ, then it's correct statistically, but it's not correct for you as an individual, okay? So that's like an important thing to understand. If it's scientifically correct, it doesn't mean that it's correct for the individual, because the individual always is somewhere, right, 1, 2, 3 standard deviations away from the statistical average, okay? So if we look at how science works, we need to consider that, and it's just not the same for everyone. So remember, right, these tools based off of which most people track their metrics, most coaches track metrics, the macros, the calories, they are important tools that I'm using myself. So I'm not talking these down, but only going from that is usually not a lasting thing to do, and not going to be a sustainable change, especially also because this is just based on generic things that are, from business perspective, of course, kind of scalable, because you can work with way more people if you're just using these, right, standard rule of thumb kind of approaches where you do your deficit. You're a woman, so I'll give you 1,700 calories. You're a man, so I'll give you 2,000 calories, and then, right, these kind of standards. So it is not that easy, and that's why right, just using those generic metrics is not the way to go, especially when it comes to making it a lasting, sustainable change. Okay, so what we're doing, and that's also why it's called the metabolism reset system, is we're essentially going the opposite direction. So instead of just cutting, so let you move more, right? Move more and burn more calories and eat less, right? Fats, eat less carbs, and just restrict how much you're eating. We're trying to go the opposite way as much as possible. We're improving blood sugar management. We're taking stress of the system by making sure you have sufficient foods with your, right? Sufficient nutrients with your workouts throughout the day, that you have what your body needs, right? And that we're not just cutting, and therefore making sure that we're taking away stress from the equation, especially if you're already working, children at home, you have type 1 diabetes, and therefore with the whole blood sugar roller coaster, you have more stress and inflammation. We make sure that we manage that better, and make sure that with the kind of training that you're doing, we're raising the caloric burn in the first place. So we're not just going the way of restricting, but making sure that we're increasing the expenditure, improving the insulin sensitivity. And when that is the case, then you have an easier time losing weight in the first place, okay? But then also, in order to make it a lifestyle change and make it something you can stick with long term, it's important to, right, focus on blood sugar stability with the foods that you're eating, especially with type 1 diabetes. Making sure that you have good energy throughout the day, good quality of sleep, because only if that's the case, you will be able to make it a lasting change and stick with routines long term. Hence, the more qualitative metrics I mentioned in the beginning, like asking about sleep, asking about energy, that will, right, that are a better predictor of how you're feeling, how's your overall well-being, and how sustainable is that journey for you, instead of just forcing the restriction. Okay, so that's the more sustainable way to go after all. If you want to make some progress when it comes to managing stress and making sure you improve quality of sleep, I actually recently built a completely free PDF. It's like called cortisol cheat sheet. If you just go to Instagram, go to my page and comment, or send me a direct message saying cortisol, I will send that over. That's a great starting point for making sure that you have some basics in place to manage that stress better and make sure you're not putting your body under too much unnecessary stress. And I'll send you that little cheat sheet, which just gives you some starting points to start off with, which are of course not individual to you, but are a great starting point to make sure that you're not making any big mistakes when it comes to managing your stress. So remember, if we sum that up, it's important to not just look at your progress pictures and how you look and how much you're eating and how much of what you're eating, but also how you're feeling after a meal, not just with digestion, but also with your energy. How is your sleep? How do you feel when you're waking up? How quickly are you falling asleep? And these kind of metrics and principles, that these also guide your journey, so that you know if you're on the right path, if something actually makes you feel better, and therefore is something that you can stick with sustainably. All right. So remember these kind of things. Not just look at the quantitative, but also the qualitative metrics. Send me the word cortisol via Instagram, via comment, or just a direct message if you want to have a starting point. And otherwise, go scroll up, subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast, and I'm looking forward to the next one.